The unspoken promise. An hour after the doctor said everything was fine, Mom died. Chapter 1. The Echo of a Promise. Boston, Massachusetts, 2024. The hospital air, thick with the scent of antiseptic and stale coffee, always felt like a heavy blanket. For the past 2 weeks, it had been my second home. My mother, Evelyn Clark, usually a vibrant whirlwind of energy at 72, lay in room 307, tethered to an intricate web of machines. A sudden, aggressive infection had taken hold, pushing her frail body to its limits. I am Olivia Hayes, 40 years old. A graphic designer by trade, I thrived on precision, on clear lines and predictable outcomes. Life, however, had a cruel way of blurring those lines. My mother was my anchor, my confidant, the one who always knew how to make me laugh, even on my darkest days. Our relationship, a vibrant tapestry woven with shared jokes, quiet understandings, and an unbreakable bond, had been the constant in my often chaotic life. She was a single mother, raising me with fierce devotion after my father left when I was young. Her strength, her unwavering optimism, had shaped me. My brother, Mark, 38, a data analyst with a similar affinity for logic, had flown in from Seattle the moment he heard the news. We sat together in the sterile waiting room, clinging to each other for support. Two adults suddenly adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The doctors, a revolving door of calm, measured voices, had offered little concrete hope, only cautious optimism. Until today, Dr. Eleanor Vance, the lead physician, a woman whose steady gaze and reassuring demeanor had been a small comfort in these trying times, walked into the waiting room. Her scrubs were pristine, her smile gentle. "Olivia, Mark," she began, her voice calm and steady. "I have good news. Your mother's fever has broken. Her vitals are stabilizing. We've seen a significant improvement in her response to the antibiotics. The infection is receding." My breath hitched. Mark and I exchanged a look of stunned disbelief, then a surge of overwhelming relief. Hope, a fragile, almost forgotten emotion, bloomed in my chest. Dr. Vance continued, "She's still weak, of course, but the worst is definitely over. We'll keep her in observation for a few more days, but all signs point to a full recovery. She's a fighter, your mother." "So, she's going to be okay?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, afraid to believe it, afraid to jinx it. Dr. Vance met my gaze, her eyes kind. "Yes, Olivia, she's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine." The words hung in the air, a lifeline thrown to two drowning souls. Everything's going to be fine. It was a promise, a definitive statement. The clarity I had yearned for, finally delivered. Mark pulled me into a tight hug, a shared sob of relief escaping us both. The heavy blanket of fear seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile, soaring joy. We could breathe again. Mom was going to be okay. We rushed back to her room, our hearts lighter than they had been in weeks. Mom was awake, her eyes a little clearer, a faint smile touching her lips. "Hey, my darlings," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Mom," Mark choked out, tears in his eyes. "The doctor said you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay." She gave a weak nod, her hand reaching for mine. Her touch was frail, but warm. "I told you I'm a fighter," she murmured, a hint of her usual spunk in her voice. We sat by her bedside, talking softly, sharing stories, planning her recovery, her return home. We talked about her favorite armchair by the window, the garden she loved, the quiet rhythm of her life. The future, once a bleak and terrifying blank canvas, was now filled with vibrant colors. We talked for an hour, 60 precious minutes. Brimming with renewed hope and a fragile sense of peace. Then, without warning, the machines began to shriek. A sudden, piercing alarm that tore through the quiet room like a physical blow. Mom's eyes fluttered, then rolled back. Her hand went limp in mine. The monitors flatlined. A flurry of nurses burst in, their faces grim, their movements swift and urgent. Code blue. I heard the frantic shouts, the desperate commands, paddles, CPR. Mark grabbed my arm, his face ashen, pulling me back as a team of doctors, including Dr. Vance, rushed into the room. "Mom," I screamed, my voice raw, breaking. "Mom, no." Dr. Vance, her face now etched with grim determination, worked tirelessly, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her earlier words echoed in my mind, a cruel, mocking refrain. "Everything's going to be fine." But it wasn't. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes, she straightened up, her shoulders slumping. She looked at us, her eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. Her voice, once so reassuring, was now broken. "I'm so sorry, Olivia, Mark. We did everything we could. Your mother, she's gone." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Gone, just like that. An hour after she said everything would be fine. The promise shattered, the fragile hope obliterated. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, but the deafening roar of a promise broken, a future stolen, and a heart irrevocably shattered. My mother, my anchor, was gone, and the final, cruel irony was the echo of those empty words. Everything's going to be fine. Chapter 2. The weight of unspoken words. The aftermath was a blur. Grief. A cold, relentless tide washed over me, threatening to pull me under. The hospital, once a place of fragile hope, now felt like a tomb. Mark and I clung to each other, two shipwrecked souls adrift in a sea of profound loss. The words of Dr. Vance, "Everything's going to be fine," became a tormenting refrain in my mind, echoing, mocking, fueling a simmering rage beneath the grief. How could she have said that? How could she have given us such definitive hope, only for it to be snatched away an hour later? It felt like a betrayal, a cruel deception. My logical mind, which craved order and precision, couldn't reconcile the promise with the devastating reality. The funeral was a haze of tearful embraces, murmured condolences, and the heavy scent of lilies. My Aunt Carol, Mom's older sister, flew in from California, her face etched with a grief as deep as ours. She was Mom's closest confidant, sharing a bond forged over decades. She tried to comfort me, but my heart was a raw wound, cauterized by the broken promise. Days turned into weeks. The house, Mom's house, felt cavernous without her laughter, her humming, her gentle presence. Mark stayed, trying to help me navigate the paperwork, the logistics, the brutal reality of a life without Mom. But I was lost. My work felt meaningless. The colors I used to see so vividly were muted, dull. Sleep offered no escape. Only restless dreams of hospital rooms and flatlining monitors. The anger festered. It wasn't just grief. It was a deep-seated resentment against the doctor, against the system, against the seemingly arbitrary cruelty of life. I wanted answers. I needed to understand why she said it would be fine when it clearly wasn't. Was it incompetence? A cover-up? or just a brutal twist of fate. Mark, ever the pragmatist, tried to temper my anger. Olivia, doctors are only human. They make their best assessments. Sometimes things just happen. It's not her fault. But his words fell on deaf ears. My pain needed an enemy, a target. And Dr. Vance's confident prognosis felt like a direct punch to my gut. One restless night, unable to sleep, I found myself rummaging through Mom's bedside table, a place she kept her most private treasures, an old photo album, a worn copy of her favorite novel, a small, intricate wooden box she always kept locked. I picked up the box. It was made of dark, polished wood, simple but elegant. I had never seen her open it. "My little secret box," she would say with a knowing smile, full of whispers. My fingers traced the delicate carvings. There was no key. I remembered her saying, "Some secrets don't need a key, Liv. They need a heart that understands." Typical mom, always with a cryptic remark. A sudden, overwhelming urge to open it seized me. Perhaps there, amidst her whispers, I would find some comfort, some answer that made sense of this senseless loss. I tried to pry it open, to no avail. It was secured tightly. Frustrated, I almost threw it down. But then, a flicker of memory. Mom, years ago, showing me a puzzle box she'd bought at an antique market in Charleston, South Carolina. "See, Liv," she'd said, "it looks locked, but it just needs the right touch, the right sequence of movements." My mind raced. Was this a puzzle box too? I turned it over, ran my fingers along its seams. No visible buttons, no obvious sliding panels. I twisted it, pushed it, pulled it, tapping it gently. Nothing. My rational mind insisted it was just a locked box, nothing more. But my heart, desperate for connection, insisted otherwise. I thought about her words, a heart that understands. What did my mother truly understand? What was her deepest, most guarded secret? She always preached resilience, optimism, seeing the good. But what about the parts she kept hidden? Suddenly, a memory of a specific conversation, years ago. We were sitting on her porch swing, and she was talking about fear, about how it could paralyze you. "The only way to truly overcome fear, Liv," she'd said, her voice unusually serious, "is to face it head on, to acknowledge its presence, and then to walk through it." My father, he taught me that. He had his own silent battles, his own unspoken fears, and he faced them with such quiet courage. Her father, my grandfather, Arthur Clark, a man I barely knew, who had died when I was very young. Mom rarely spoke of him, beyond brief, fond mentions, but she always said he was a man of quiet courage, who faced his own silent battles. What battles? What fears? The box, the secret, somehow felt connected to him. I thought about the box again. Some secrets don't need a key, Liv. They need a heart that understands. What did I not understand about my mother? The answer hit me like a revelation. Her unwavering optimism, her relentless positivity. It wasn't just her nature. It was a choice, a shield, a way to face her own fears. I picked up the box again. Instead of trying to pry it open, I held it gently, feeling its weight. I remembered Mom's hands, always strong, always comforting. I remembered her telling me, "Sometimes the strongest things aren't the loudest, Liv. They're the quietest." I pressed my thumb against one of the subtle carvings on the lid, a small, barely perceptible spiral. Then, inspired by a sudden intuition, I gently twisted the lid clockwise. Then counterclockwise, repeating the motion a few times, just as she'd shown me with that puzzle box. And then, with a soft, almost inaudible click, the lid sprang open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not jewels or trinkets, but a single, carefully folded letter, slightly yellowed with age, and beneath it, a worn, leather-bound journal. The letter was addressed to her, from a doctor, and dated nearly 40 years ago. My hands trembled as I carefully unfolded it, a cold dread twisting in my stomach. The past, I realized, was about to reveal a truth far more profound and complex than I could have ever imagined. Chapter 3: A Mother's Secret Burden. The letter, carefully folded and aged with time, felt heavy in my hands. It was addressed to Evelyn Clark, my mother, and the date, 1984, 35 years ago, the year I was born. My heart hammered against my ribs, a premonition of something profound. I unfolded the letter. The letterhead was from a prominent Boston hospital, and the signature, Dr. Elias Thorne, a name I didn't recognize. A content, however, left me breathless. Dear Ms. Clark, further to our consultation on date, I am writing to confirm the diagnosis. The prognosis for your condition, given its advanced stage and aggressive nature, is indeed grim. While we will, of course, explore all palliative options to ensure your comfort, the reality is that your life expectancy is severely limited. I understand this news is devastating, especially given your unique circumstances. My deepest sympathies. I implore you, Ms. Clark, to consider how you wish to proceed regarding your future and that of your unborn child. While I cannot offer false hope, I can promise to provide the utmost care and support during this incredibly difficult time. Sincerely, Dr. Elias Thorne, Head of Oncology. My blood ran cold. Cancer, advanced stage, grim prognosis, unborn child. It was a cruel, unimaginable truth. My mother, Evelyn Clark, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer the year I was born. She had been carrying me, bringing a new life into the world, while facing her own impending death. A wave of nausea washed over me. All my life, she had been this beacon of strength, this unwavering force. She never spoke of illness, never complained, never showed a trace of fear. Her optimism, I had always believed, was simply her nature. Now, I realized it was a monumental act of courage, a deliberate choice, a meticulously constructed shield. I picked up the journal beneath the letter. Its cover was worn, unassuming, but inside, Clara May's familiar handwriting flowed across the pages, starting from that fateful year, 1984. October 12th, 1984, Boston. The doctor's words echo in my head, severely limited. How can this be? I am carrying a life within me, a daughter. How can I bring her into this world, knowing I will leave it so soon? My heart is breaking, not for myself, but for her. She deserves a mother, a full life, and I will be a ghost. October 15th, 1984. I won't tell anyone, not my family, not Amelia's father, who is long gone anyway. I won't burden them, especially not my baby. She will not grow up with the shadow of death hanging over her. She will know joy. She will know light. I will be her light for as long as I can. November 2nd, 1984. The treatments are draining. The pain, a dull, constant hum. But when I feel her kick, oh, the joy. It's worth it. Every single agonizing moment. I will fight, not to survive for myself, but to give her more time, more memories, more love. I read on, page after agonizing page. The journal was a testament to her silent, courageous battle. She chronicled her treatments, the side effects, the brief periods of remission, the inevitable relapses. But more importantly, she chronicled my life, my first steps, My first words, my kindergarten play, my scraped knees, my triumphs. My heart breaks. She wrote about watching me grow, filled with a bittersweet joy, knowing her time with me was finite. She wrote about her deliberate choice to project optimism, to infuse every moment with joy, to create a childhood for me that was untouched by her hidden sorrow. I want her to believe in happy endings, she wrote, even if mine won't be one. I want her to carry light within her, not shadows. She revealed that she consulted with Dr. Thorne throughout the years, a compassionate physician who understood her desperate need to live as long as possible for me and to maintain the secret. He managed her condition, giving her more years than anyone expected. My tears flowed freely now, not tears of anger, but of a profound, shattering understanding. My mother hadn't been incompetent in her optimism. She had been a warrior. Her "everything's going to be fine" was not a lie, but a mantra she had lived by. A promise she made to herself and to me every single day of her life. She had fought. She had defied death for 40 years, giving me a childhood, a life, a mother that no one believed she could. I called Mark. My voice was thick with emotion, but clear. Mark, I know why Mom was always so optimistic, why she said everything's going to be fine. I read him excerpts from the letter, from the journal. He listened in stunned silence, then broke down himself. The anger in his voice, mirroring my own, dissipated into raw grief and overwhelming awe. She lived with that for her whole life? For us? The rage I had harbored against Dr. Vance dissolved into shame. Dr. Vance. The contemporary physician had simply seen a sudden, aggressive turn in an already compromised system. She had given us hope based on a momentary improvement, unaware of the decades-long valiant battle my mother had waged, unaware of the fragile balance of her life. She had given me a glimpse of the promise my mother had whispered to herself every day of her life. This revelation transformed everything. It wasn't just about my mother's death. It was about her extraordinary life, a life lived under the shadow of a terminal diagnosis, yet filled with unwavering light and boundless love. The "everything's going to be fine" wasn't a broken promise. It was her life's most profound truth. She had made it fine, for me, for 40 years. The puzzle box, the secret, had not only revealed her truth, but had also finally set me free from the crushing weight of my unreasoning anger. My grief was still immense, but it was now interwoven with an immense, humbling pride. Chapter 4: The Unseen Battle. The days that followed the revelation of Mom's journal were a profound journey into understanding. My anger, once a sharp, bitter blade, had dulled, replaced by a deep, aching admiration. Her optimism, her vibrant energy, her boundless capacity for joy, these weren't just facets of her personality. They were a testament to an unseen battle she had waged, silently, heroically, for 40 years. I devoured every word of her journal. She chronicled the physical toll of her disease, the fatigue, the pain, the fear. But intertwined with these struggles were meticulous entries about my childhood. She wrote about taking me to my first ballet class, even when her body screamed in protest. She detailed our trips to Cape Cod, fishing for hours, laughing as I inevitably caught nothing. She described baking my favorite chocolate chip cookies, masking her weariness with a bright smile. Every milestone, every memory, every shared moment was imbued with a poignant awareness that her time was limited. She wrote about the immense loneliness of carrying such a secret. Sometimes, she confided in her journal, I long to simply fall apart, to share this burden. But then I look at Olivia's bright, innocent face, and I know I cannot. Her childhood must be unclouded. My strength must be her reality. She even mentioned how she would escape to the Arnold Arboretum in Boston, walking for hours amidst the trees, finding solace and strength in nature, allowing herself to shed tears she couldn't show me. Her journal entries also revealed her relationship with Dr. Elias Thorne. He wasn't just her physician, he became her confidant, a quiet accomplice in her beautiful deception. He understood her fierce desire to protect me, to give me as normal a life as possible. He managed her treatments, experimented with new therapies, pushing the boundaries of what was medically possible, not just for her survival, but for her to live long enough to raise me. He believed in her fight. He helped her buy time, precious time that defied all initial prognoses. He was not just a doctor, he was an ally in her profound act of love. I reached out to Dr. Thorne's office. He was long retired, but his former practice, now run by his children, provided me with a contact number. When I called him, he sounded frail, his voice raspy with age. But when I introduced myself as Olivia, Evelyn Clark's daughter, a flicker of recognition, then deep emotion, entered his voice. "Evelyn," he whispered, a profound reverence in his tone. "A remarkable woman. One of a kind." I told him I had found her journal, that I knew her secret. There was a long silence on the line, then a soft sigh. "She was determined, Olivia," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "From the moment she told me she was pregnant, she refused to accept her prognosis. She fought for every single day, every single month, every single year. She would look at me and say, 'Doctor, I just need a little more time for my daughter.'" He recounted stories of her incredible resilience, her unwavering spirit in the face of excruciating pain and daunting odds. He confirmed that her death was not a failure of his prognosis that final day, but a sudden, catastrophic system collapse after a decades-long battle. Her body simply had no more fight left, even when her spirit was willing. He explained that her heart had been incredibly weakened by years of treatments and the relentless nature of her disease, which, despite all efforts, had spread silently. The sudden infection in the hospital had just pushed her over the edge. "She truly achieved a miracle, Olivia," he said gently. "She was given a few years, at best. She gave you 40. His words confirmed everything in the journal, solidifying the profound truth of her life. My mother was a modern-day hero, battling an invisible enemy with grace and courage, all for the sake of her child. I shared these revelations with Mark and Aunt Carol. Mark, hearing Dr. Thorne's account, was speechless. His pragmatic mind, which had sought logical explanations for her death, was now confronted with a truth more profound than any data analysis could capture. He saw his mother not just as the loving parent, but as a legend. Aunt Carol, who had grieved with me over the suddenness of my mother's passing, now wept tears of understanding. "My poor, brave Evelyn," she sobbed, "carrying that alone. All those years. No wonder she was always so strong. She had to be." The family, once just a collection of individuals, became a deeper, more intricately woven tapestry of shared history and silent heroism. That everything's going to be fine had never been a lie. It was a philosophy, a way of life, a mother's desperate, unwavering promise to her child, a promise she kept with every fiber of her being for far longer than anyone, including her doctors, had ever thought possible. I began to see my own life through a new lens. My mother's resilience, her ability to face adversity with a smile, had been quietly instilled in me. I inherited not just her physical features, but her unwavering spirit, her refusal to be defined by hardship. The design challenges at work, the everyday stresses of life, they seemed trivial compared to the silent battle she had waged. Her legacy was not just her love, but the profound strength she had unknowingly passed on to me. I started taking long walks in the Boston Public Garden, much like she used to walk in the Arboretum, allowing the quiet beauty of nature to soothe my soul, to connect with her spirit. I found solace in the simple act of breathing, of existing, a privilege she had fought so hard to extend for herself, for me. The anger and confusion that had shrouded my grief finally lifted. In its place, a profound peace settled in. My mother had not been taken from me unjustly. She had fought an impossible fight, and she had won for 40 glorious years. Her final hour, the doctor's optimistic words, and her sudden passing were not a cruel irony, but the final exhausted exhalation of a warrior who had given absolutely everything she had, right until the very end. She had kept her promise, not just for a day, but for a lifetime. Chapter 5. The whispers of resilience. The Boston air, once a suffocating blanket of grief and unanswered questions, now carried a different resonance. It was still tinged with the memory of loss, but now also with the profound echo of my mother's quiet heroism. Her journal, her doctor's testimony, and the weight of 40 years of silent sacrifice had redefined not only her life, but also my understanding of my own. I kept the wooden box on my bedside table, a constant reminder of her strength. Inside, the worn journal rested beside Dr. Thorne's letter, a tangible testament to her extraordinary journey. I reread entries often, each time uncovering new layers of her resilience, new insights into the silent battle she had waged. She wrote about her fears, yes, but always followed them with a resolve to find the joy, to make every moment count. She never wanted me to see her pain, only her unwavering love. My conversations with Mark and Aunt Carol continued, filled with a newfound depth and understanding. We talked about how her endless optimism, once perceived as merely a personality trait, was a conscious daily act of defiance against a terminal illness. Aunt Carol recalled specific instances, how Mom would insist on hosting family dinners, even when she was clearly exhausted, how she'd always volunteer for school events despite her health struggles. These weren't just signs of her giving nature. They were acts of fierce love, a desperate attempt to create a normal, joyful life for me, defying the grim prognosis that hung over her. Mark, ever analytical, became obsessed with finding other cases, researching medical advances, trying to understand how his mother had defied the odds for so long. He discovered that Dr. Thorne was indeed a pioneer in early aggressive cancer treatments for specific types of tumors, and Mom's case was a testament to both her will and his innovative approach. The doctor hadn't given false hope. He had partnered with a patient who chose to live with an extraordinary, singular purpose. This revelation transformed my own approach to life. I had always been driven, pragmatic, a problem solver. But my mother's story infused my work and personal life with a new sense of profound purpose. My designs became more expressive, more layered, seeking to convey not just aesthetics, but deeper meanings. I found myself more patient, more empathetic, understanding that beneath every surface, there might be an unseen struggle, an untold story. I began volunteering at a local hospice, finding solace and a strange sense of purpose in helping others navigate their final journey. I would sit with patients, listen to their stories, and offer comfort, often recalling my mother's courage. It was my way of honoring her legacy, of carrying forward the light she had so meticulously preserved. I also started advocating for better support systems for caregivers and families dealing with terminal illness, inspired by the silent burden my mother had carried. I felt a profound connection to others who had walked similar paths, realizing that my mother's story, while unique in its specifics, echoed a universal human experience of love, loss, and resilience. The "everything's going to be fine" mantra, once a source of bitter irony, became a profound source of strength. It wasn't a guarantee of a perfect outcome, but a declaration of intent, a commitment to face life's challenges with hope and courage. It was her promise to me, and now it became my promise to myself and to those around me. One crisp autumn morning, I visited Mom's grave. The leaves were turning, painting the cemetery in vibrant hues of red and gold. I sat on the grass, holding the wooden box, running my fingers over its smooth surface. I talked to her quietly, recounting the revelations, telling her how much I admired her, how deeply grateful I was for her sacrifice, for the life she had given me. "Mom," I whispered, tears finally falling, not from anger or despair, but from a profound, aching love. "You didn't just give me life. You taught me how to live it. You showed me that even in the face of impossible odds, love, courage, and an unwavering spirit can create miracles. You truly made everything fine, for me." For 40 years, the wind wrestled through the trees, a soft, gentle whisper, like her voice. I felt her presence, not as a haunting ghost of what was lost, but as a powerful, enduring spirit that continued to guide me. My mother, Evelyn Clark, had not simply died. She had completed her most profound act of love, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, strength, and a promise that had, against all odds, been kept. Her story was not just about death, but about the extraordinary triumph of a life lived with unwavering light, a testament to the fact that even when the inevitable comes, love, true love, always finds a way to make everything, somehow, truly fine. Her final breath was not an end, but an echo of her eternal love, forever resounding in my heart.